we wanted to talk about kind of the, controlling the stack, things like that. So like, I want to, we've talked about this idea of, you want these things, and there's this struggle between this want and then just being and letting things happen. But we discussed Bill Cunningham a little bit earlier before the episode started. And Bill Cunningham, there's the quote that I was telling you about, where he basically says, he's like, don't take the money, kid. He's like, as soon as you take the money, they control you. Yep. So, and I think one thing that we are constantly kind of trying to figure out, and this has been a constant conversation between us, is, okay, well, money is a necessity in our society. We live in America in, the 21st century, and you can survive on a little amount of money, but you do need money, especially if you have family. There's stupid things about standard of living that we enjoy and stuff like that. And you can hate it, but it's like, if I'm being honest, I don't want to give up. No. So, No. And that's an entitled position, sure. But I want to kind of switch this into developing a more practical framework, or at least our thoughts around that. And we talked about controlling the stack, which is, how do you, or what, I guess, let's keep it more of a philosophical. I don't want to give direct points, because I don't think we've quite figured out how to do this yet. But, there's this idea of, there's a certain amount that's just enough. And it's almost like the Patagonia model of business, where it's like, we're not trying to be the biggest company in the world. We're just trying to make a really good product. We're trying to take care of our people, and we're trying to have an impact after, for future generations. Yeah. And I think that's what you could ask for anybody who creates work for a living. Mm-hmm. That's a great, if you could look back on your life and be like, man, I lived a very, comfortable life, but I never lost touch. Mm-hmm. The work never lost touch, never lost the humanity. And, I raised family, raised whatever, appreciated, just was able to live in the moment my whole life. I think that'd be that's something a lot of people would probably want. So controlling the stack, what does that mean to you? And then we can maybe jump off from there.
For me, it really means having total ownership over sort of the life cycle of a piece of content, something that you make, intellectual property, that you own the production aspects of it, you own the distribution aspects and the exhibition aspects, that you are not necessarily...
You're vertically integrated.
Yeah. You could argue, being a YouTuber, you're at risk, because if they demonetize you or something happens or whatever, like your entire body of work is inaccessible. It's no longer earning any revenue, whatever. So like they technically own the exhibition of your work, and you're at the mercy of the ad rates that they charge and all that stuff for that revenue. So, the ideal situation is you make a piece of content or develop intellectual property. You have an audience to distribute it to, and mechanisms to do that, whether it's a website or some kind of paywall to view your video, or whatever it is that you made. You could argue that there's little nuances in there of, well, you don't really own the stack because that's like through this web, whatever. But for the most part, if you have that audience and they can purchase whatever it is that you've created, you keep 100% of the money, other than the expenses related to making it, having a website, or I don't know, whatever the expenses are, production expenses, etc.
There's no funneling happening with your distribution. There's no funneling happening with your... Yeah.
And you can sit there and go, I'm not waiting for the studios to tell me whether or not this big giant movie made a profit, and that my 2% of net is going to yield me a $10 million payday. Like, they're going to come up with ways to manipulate that information to make it look like it didn't make any money. And this is part of the greater conversation of the WGA strike, SAG-AFTRA, all that stuff, and what they're trying to do to have more ownership of the stack, because right now they all feel like it's completely lopsided. Yeah. And with the advent of streaming, that especially owning the stack with Netflix and the different streamers.
Well, there's no royalties anymore. There's no...
Well, and they've manipulated what the definition of a television show is. is. And so the contracts were signed when streaming was sort of, we hadn't really figured it out, but now it's really established, and the actors and the writers want more of a piece of that. But of course, the streamers don't want to give it up. The studios don't want to give it up. They own the news organizations, the newspapers, some of the streaming services that they've created in response to things like Netflix, et cetera. So it's a lot. But I will say that for me, part of owning the stack is not needing permission to work and put my work in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can sit there and go, I have all the production tools necessary to create a piece of content. I can distribute that content to my audience in a number of different ways, and exhibit that content on YouTube or whatever, and it can translate into revenue that I feel like I have a good amount of ownership over.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I'm not sort of like nailing the exact meaning of exhibition and distribution and all that stuff, but just in a big picture look at it, that's what I'm talking about. And this comes out of having tried to break into Hollywood as a screenwriter and writing stuff for free from companies that are making millions of dollars a year off of their intellectual property that they've developed with other screenwriters. It's just a given that you're going to write for years for free until you finally get that script that sells, and then you'll be able to start making money. But then you've got to sell more stuff to get your quote up and all this stuff. And I just didn't like feeling like there were these like real, and I don't know if that's me being whiny and entitled, that I didn't like that there were gatekeepers that said, hey, if your stuff's not up to snuff or a quality or commercial enough or whatever it is that we care about, we're just going to say no, and the work that you're doing isn't going to get in front of anybody.
The problem when you introduce those people, there's conflict of interest.
Yeah.
There's financial incentives to do certain things. There's just orthodoxies that are kind of built into hierarchical structures that it's hard to really innovate or do anything different than what's been proven. Especially now, we live in an age of computer modeling where everything's this is the way to do it.
Yeah, they can plug a script into a model and say whether or not it's gonna have ROI or what the big concerns are budget wise, this or that. So there's like a lot of fear there, like investing all this money into a movie. I mean, look at Indiana Jones, dating our podcast again, but the new Indiana Jones movie needed to make.
You mean that Indiana Jones movie that came out in 2023, right?
Yeah.
That's the one.
Needs to make $300 million just to break even. Like it's ridiculous, and that's a known franchise with a A-list star, all that stuff that seems like a sure thing, and it's performing not as hoped. So the excitement from me, someone that felt like I had ideas but couldn't make them because of production, a camera and all that stuff. The stuff's expensive, but now, I mean, we're recording this with flip cameras.
Anything goes.
Anything goes, and you can really make something. I mean, the investment that we've made beyond our time to create this, is relatively low
for sure.
For what could have the potential of building an audience, generating revenue, all of that stuff. And then also just being personally fulfilling to have these conversations that we have anyway, and turning them into a piece of content. So that's what, to wrap everything up, that's really what YouTube specifically has done for me. Is it's really empowered me to take what I see in my mind, whether it's a video, photography, whatever, and then bring it in front of an audience to try to earn revenue and earn a full-time living, waking up doing exactly what I want to do every day. I sat there and got a membership video done today and did a live stream, and I'm on cloud nine when it's done, because I'm sitting there going, I made something and got it out there and connected with my audience and my community. I brought my buddy Dylan on to my live stream, and we talked about him in his 3-year anniversary with YouTube, all that stuff. And it's just, I just love it. I have had jobs. I worked at a factory in high school. I worked in a cubicle before I went to grad school, and they literally drained my soul. And all I could think about was, what can I do to earn a living doing what I love to do every day. You used to think, I've got to win the lottery. I have to sell a screenplay because it's going to sell for $250,000 and I'll finally have some breathing room to just like focus on making what I want to make, not working at the Apple store in Pasadena to try to fill in the gaps between concert video content editing that I was doing. That was not moving me forward other than the revenue that allowed me to keep trying to write screenplays. It wasn't getting me closer to being a screenwriter.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.